With the NFL draft just around the corner, it's time for me to talk about my top Vikings draft needs. Hello, I am Levi Nordstrom, and this is Couch Football, where I basically keep football simple. I am going to go over some possible draft needs for the Vikings and possible players that they could be selecting at the picks that they have in this NFL draft, along with going over some players from the top 30 visits that I either like or don't really like. So if you guys want simple yet informative content about football, make sure you guys subscribe, like this video, and of course, make sure you guys comment which players you want the Vikings to draft in this upcoming NFL draft. The positions we are going to be looking at is interior defensive line, corner, safety, wide receiver, center, running back, linebacker, and tight end to finish off. I know quarterback is a big question mark for the Vikings, but we already have multiple quarterbacks on the roster that have the potential to be a starter, and I think that's more of a question mark for the 2027 NFL draft, not this upcoming NFL draft. I'm going to start off with safety, mainly because a lot of people are predicting us to select Oregon safety Dylan Thieneman or Emmanuel McNeil-Warren, the safety out of Toledo. Both of these players, in my opinion, are fairly similar. There's a couple basic differences. I think McNeil-Warren's a little bit more nuanced in pass coverage, just slightly, because his hip fluidity is a little bit better. So that meaning he can flip his hips in coverage, he can follow these speedy receivers down the field, and he won't get burned, basically. Of course, Thieneman has top-end speed to make up for possible fluidity concerns. So even if he's a little bit slow to turn around and start chasing a receiver, he can catch up to them if need be. Of course, if you're going with these two safeties here, it has to be in the first round, and that comes with a big ticket, especially safety being a less valuable position in the NFL. There are other positions where I think the Vikings should target in this upcoming NFL draft rather than safety in the first round. However, I do love guys like Genesis Smith, Arizona safety, AJ Halsey, LSU safety, in potentially the second or third round. Halsey's getting a lot more hype, but I actually prefer Genesis Smith. He's a little bit younger of a prospect, and I think he's just overall a little bit better than Halsey, but I do see the hype surrounding AJ Halsey in the second round. But when I'm looking at DBs, I look at hip stiffness, like I said with the original safeties. I think fluid hips are one of the most important traits to have, especially in the NFL. In college, you can get away with that if you're a top-end athlete with good sideline-to-sideline speed like Halsey has. But when it gets to the NFL, everybody's faster, everybody's more physical, and with the lack of hip fluidity, it's hard to mirror receivers as easily as it probably was in college for him. Now, a possible concern for Genesis Smith would be his tackling. He has missed far too many tackles in his college career, but I think tackling is something that can easily be developed. I think hip fluidity and stuff like that is more of a problem to develop, because that's kind of something that's natural, or you have to seriously spend a lot more time doing hip exercises or things like yoga and stuff like that. Not a lot of people like to do that. So that natural athleticism that Genesis Smith carries, I think, is going to be a huge benefit in the NFL. Now, a safety later on would be Bud Clark. He's receiving a little bit more hype, specifically from the McShay Show. He's more of a probably third to fourth round safety. He's an older prospect, but Bud Clark out of TCU is a very good sneaky pick for the Vikings, so keep that in mind. Moving on to interior defensive linemen here, Caleb Banks is a massive human who has plenty of athleticism to back that up, so he's not just a run stuffer. However, his fatal flaw, his kryptonite, is his health. He cannot stay healthy. I believe he only played in 2 games last year. So Caleb Banks is a risky pick. He would be a first-round pick, absolutely, if he would have stayed healthy. But he might fall to the second round to the Vikings pick. So I would be totally down for the Vikings to take him in the second round. Honestly, if they traded down in the first round to like pick 30 to 32, maybe an early second round pick, I would also be down to take Caleb Banks just because of that massive upside, no pun intended. And I think Banks, if he can stay healthy, could possibly be one of the best interior defensive linemen, and pairing him with Jalen Redmond would be so fun to watch. Now, a more realistic option probably in the second round to maybe third round possibly would be Dominique Orange. Not exactly sure how to pronounce it, but he's known as Big Citrus around here, and he is a very, very solid defensive lineman who is a great athlete. He's just very raw, so he's going to need time to develop, but he was a top 30 visit for the Vikings. Of course, being a top 30 visit doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get selected by that team. It's more so just answering maybe questions that you might have about the character or questions that you might have on or off the field in terms of like leadership and stuff like that. But basically, top 30 visit, it's just teams going and meeting with these players, and they can only meet with 30 of them, of course. Those are the two names that I had for interior defensive linemen. Of course, there's plenty of other defensive linemen they could take later on, but I've got a feeling they're going to go with an interior defensive lineman in day one or day two because of just the sheer amount of departures on that defensive line. I also want to quickly shout out the possibility of Jonathan Grenard being traded. There was rumors early on in the offseason. I don't think that's going to happen, but if that does happen, then all of a sudden edge rusher is a major need to replace. So if that does happen, I'm guessing they're probably going to get like a second round pick for Jonathan Grenard, something around there. I could totally see them going with an edge rusher on day two, maybe even day one. Guys like Keldrick Falk could fall, Auburn edge rusher. So keep that in mind. He is a great run defender, but he is extremely raw in the pass game. So I just wanted to quickly shout out Keldrick Falk before we move on to cornerback, and then finally get to offensive positions afterwards. Corner is the major wild card here because the Vikings seemingly always need cornerback, but when they draft the cornerback, it almost never works out. You know, I think of Andrew Booth. I was so excited that we drafted him. I thought he was going to be an unbelievable steal, an unbelievable player, and that just didn't work out. And of course, there's been unfortunate events like Kyrie Jackson passing away, especially at cornerback and DB in general. It just hasn't worked out for the Vikings, and hopefully this year it's a different story, because I'm assuming at some point in the draft we have to go cornerback. We signed one in the offseason from the Steelers, James Pierre, who is a primarily special teams corner, but played very well in limited action last year for the Steelers. So I think they still have to go with cornerback here, and Jermod McCoy is staring right at me. He's falling because of injury concerns. It's a risky pick, and I would be shocked if the Vikings do it, because I would assume they want to play safe and take a reliable player in the first round, because they've taken big swings in recent drafts, and none of them have worked out essentially outside of probably Dallas Turner. So Jermod McCoy is a bold pick because he missed all of last season due to injury. However, he is extremely athletic, ran a 4.3 40. I think it was like a 40-inch vertical or 38, something like that. A potentially 11-foot broad jump. Just a great athleticism. So if he can just continue to increase his health from that ACL recovery, he could be an absolute steal, because people say his tape from his sophomore year is worthy of a top 10 pick because he was so dominant as a cornerback in the SEC as a sophomore. But of course, missing all of last season, it kind of causes him to possibly drop in the draft. And if he fell to pick, 13, I could totally see the Vikings trying to trade up and take him, but there's not many scenarios where the Vikings will trade up this year. I think they're going to play it safe and maybe even trade down this year. But Jermod McCoy, a little bit as a player, he is great in zone coverage, which is extremely important. The Vikings are looking for great zone corners with great ball hawking skills. Man coverage is, of course, a great skill to have, but zone is more needed. And of course, the Vikings play a lot of press coverage with the amount of times they blitz to delay the receivers a bit to help the defensive line get home as soon as possible, because blitzing, of course, is risky when it comes to the passing game. And Jermod McCoy is great in press coverage as well. So this is a perfect situation for McCoy and for the Vikings, and that marriage would be great. But let's talk about some more realistic options with Chris Johnson potentially being a first rounder. I think this is a great situation for the Vikings if they can trade down. Between 25 and 32 and take Chris Johnson, there was some top speed concerns coming into the draft, but he has killed the draft process reportedly in the meeting room, and he ran a 4.4 something 40-yard dash, but I know it was in the 4.4s, and that's a great time for him, especially with his top-end speed concerns. And he's just a great football player. He's great in zone coverage, and he's solid in press. Just a good athlete in general, so it makes a lot of sense for the Vikings to select him. Now, a wild card I'm going to throw out there, Devin Moore, Florida cornerback. He is a solid option for the Vikings, probably in the 3rd round, and I really like him because he's a good athlete, but it's more so for his size. The Vikings like their bigger cornerbacks, and him being 6'4", and he's good in press coverage is a very good sign for the Vikings to possibly consider him. So I just wanted to throw that out there. Devin Moore, cornerback for Florida. And then another wild card would be Chandler Rivers, maybe in that 4th round range from Duke. He's just 5'10", but he's a fairly good athlete. He's good in zone coverage, and he could be a possible corner that they target later in the draft if they decide that other positions are more important. On to the center position. I have 3 down. It happens to be the top 3 centers in the draft because I think the Vikings drafting a good center is extremely important because it will greatly help the quarterback read blitzes, more specifically J.J. McCarthy, because, of course, Kyler Murray has more experience kind of reading defenses. But I put down Jake Slaughter, Connor Lew, and Sam Hecht. Not really in order. All 3 of them are very similar. I have Slaughter and Lew just slightly higher with a late 2nd round grade, and then Sam Hecht with a early 3rd round grade. Slaughter from Florida is widely considered the best center in the draft, but all 3 of them are great options. Connor Lew from Auburn, Sam Hecht from Kansas State. Slaughter is a overall really good center, known for his mind. He's very good at reading blitzes and in stunts, all that nature. And then Connor Lew and Sam Hecht are known as great pass protectors. So those are like the main notes for them. I think all 3 of them are generally good at understanding stunts and blitzes, but Slaughter is just a step ahead of them, and he is just very well-rounded as a run blocker and pass blocker. Now, wide receiver. We're getting to the fun positions finally with wide receiver, running back, and tight end. With the offense really struggling last year, it's important that we acknowledge all 3 of these positions. Starting off with the wide receiver, Jeremy Bernard is my favorite wide receiver in the draft. He's not my number 1 receiver. He's like number 4, I think, for me, number 5. But Jeremy Bernard is such a reliable option. He's just a chain mover, great at recognizing zone coverage, just solid route runner, solid at literally everything. And his speed is not elite. That's the major knock on him. He's got decent speed. But if you think about these top-end wide receivers, Puka Nacua, Jackson Smith, and Jigba, they're not known for their elite speed. They're such good route runners, and they have such a deep understanding of zone coverage that I think Jeremy Bernard has the potential to be a really good wide receiver in the NFL. Some people think his ceiling is capped because of that lack of speed. I think being a great route runner is far more important than speed and athleticism. I think he also could replace Jordan Addison if he ends up getting if he ends up getting released because of the massive contract that is probably going to happen here very soon. Of course, they just signed his 5th-year option, so we have Addison around for another year guaranteed. But Jeremy Bernard could be that type of player to replace him, and he would be a great Robin to Justin Jefferson's Batman. Some more fun picks. I put Antonio Williams and Chris Brazzell down for more 2nd-round options. Jeremy Bernard's also a 2nd-round option. But Antonio Williams and Chris Brazzell, in my opinion, are just a step alone. They're more mid to late 2nd round projections for me. Antonio Williams has great speed, great route runner, but he has a smaller catch radius, being under 6 feet tall, and there are some durability concerns with his injury history. Chris Brazzell is a height, weight, speed demon. He's 6'5", and he runs like a 4.3. So that's all you need to know about him. There is a potential route running concern just because he came from Tennessee. They have a RPO style offense, so Brazzell didn't really have to run a route tree that was truly nuanced. So he just ran a lot of go routes and slants and basic routes. But he is more developed than Jalen Hyatt and those type of receivers in the past from Tennessee. But on to more of a wild card with Bryce Lance. I am from NDSU. I go to NDSU, so I've seen Bryce Lance plenty of times in person, and I can tell you for a fact, this guy has unbelievable hands. He can catch about anything that's thrown his way. Some of those highlight reel catches, he's got multiple one-hand catches and crazy contested catches. He's 6'3". He's an unbelievable football player. Of course, he played lower competition, so that could be a potential concern, but Christian Watson played at NDSU, and he's playing really well. He just can't stay healthy for the Packers. But Bryce Lance makes a ton of sense in that 4th round range. He's got great hands. Like I said, solid route runner. He's not super quick in and out of his breaks because of his size, but his long speed is legit. He's a 4'3" wide receiver, so he can take the top off the defense, which will be great for receivers like Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison to feed over the middle and underneath. And he's also surprisingly really good after the catch. He reads like a running back, in my opinion, and he has so many like 50-plus, 40-plus yard touchdowns. Just look up his highlights. It's unbelievable. On to running back with Jadarian Price being an obvious option here, being a home run threat in the 2nd round. I think you might have to trade up a little bit to get him, but he would match perfectly with Jordan Mason and Aaron Jones in the backfield. Of course, re-signing Aaron Jones kind of makes a big question mark, like will the Vikings actually target a running back early in the draft? I think they will, because it seems like they're doing their homework. They have multiple top 30 visits with running backs, Damon Claiborne, Emmett Johnson, and Jonah Coleman, but Jadarian Price would be an elite change of pace back with his great speed. Of course, he does have a little bit of an injury history, tearing his ACL early in his career, but that's a couple of years away now, so it's not a major concern. On to Emmett Johnson, being the hometown kid from Minneapolis, Minnesota, and he also had the top 30 visit. He's not the fastest guy in the world, but he's similar to Bucky Irving in a way, where he just finds a way to break runs, and instead of getting a 3-yard gain, he gets like a 10-yard gain. And he's a younger running back. Especially in this draft class, a lot of these running backs are older prospects. So it's kind of nice to have a younger guy to develop alongside veterans like Jordan Mason and Aaron Jones. But I think the next running back, Damon Claiborne, makes a lot of sense here rather than Emmett Johnson, because Claiborne is more of a true shifty running back. He's a smaller guy, but I think he reads the field really well. And he makes a lot of sense in like that 4th round range. You don't have to spend a huge price tag on him like you might have to with Emmett Johnson and Jadarian Price in round 2. Emmett Johnson might fall to round 3, but we will have to see about that. Jonah Coleman is another running back option, but similar to Emmett Johnson, he's not the fastest. And I think if the Vikings are going running back, they're going to want a home run threat back there because they already have that bruiser and that receiving back with Aaron Jones and Jordan Mason. On to tight end and linebacker to finish off. These positions aren't as big of a need as the other ones I have talked about to begin this video, so I'm going to just simply cover a few players at each position, starting with linebacker. Anthony Hill Jr. from Texas in the 2nd round makes a ton of sense. He had a top 30 visit with him. He's one of my favorite linebackers in this draft, and he has tons of potential. He's a younger guy. He played as a freshman at Texas, and that's all you need to know about him. He's just a great player in general, and overall, there's really not a true weakness to his game. Another player that had a top 30 visit with the Vikings is Jake Galde, linebacker from Cincinnati. He's a solid run defender with good tackling ability, but there are question marks in the pass game that allows him to potentially be a 3rd round pick, so the price tag's not as rich. But a player that I'm really excited about is Josiah Trotter, mainly because he has the talent and football runs in his bloodlines. Jeremiah Trotter and Jeremiah Trotter Jr. both were in the NFL. That would be his dad and his brother. Both are very good football players, of course, in their own right. But Josiah Trotter has a great run defense right away, and he just needs a little bit of help in developing his pass defense. He doesn't have the athleticism necessarily, but if you look at a picture of him, he is yoked. I also like how he's one of the younger prospects in the draft. I think he's going to be 21 throughout his rookie season, so of course that is a major bonus for a developmental player. On to the last position at tight end. I only have 2 here. I don't know if the Vikings are going with tight end. I think it's either going to be a shocker in Kenyon Sadiq in the first round, or they're going to wait until day 3. So I'm going to mention Kenyon Sadiq briefly for a first-round pick. He's the best tight end in this draft class. He will be a great weapon. And if you want to hear me expand even more on him, I talked about him in my final NFL mock draft, where I kind of break down each position throughout the first round, and I had Kenyon Sadiq going to the Vikings. My last player is one of my favorites in the draft that not a lot of people talk about. It is Daquan Wright, Ole Miss tight end, possibly in the 5th round, I would say. He's a good athlete, good at catching, solid route running. He's just a really solid receiving tight end in day 3. Not great at blocking, so TJ Hawkinson will probably have to take those duties. But putting Daquan Wright out in slot as a big slot option every once in a while would be fun. And of course, the NFL runs a lot of 2 tight end sets, so getting another dynamic tight end would be very smart for the Vikings, especially with TJ Hawkinson kind of struggling post his ACL tear a couple of years ago, and he just really hasn't been the same since. I think he's on the way out very soon and could be probably released next year. That was my thoughts on the Vikings' top draft needs and players to target. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and of course, mention some of your favorite players. Make sure you guys subscribe while you're down there, like this video, and of course, make sure you guys share it to Vikings fans. I am Levi Nordstrom, and this is Couch Football, and I will see you guys in the next video.